So it's 2023 and I know many of you will be looking for a camera upgrade or maybe even your first camera. I've been using the A7 III since 2019 and even to this day it's still my main camera for weddings, streets, cars, and portraits. When Sony first released this camera, it was the best hybrid camera available, great for photos and videos. But I know now a lot of you will be wondering, is the A7 III still relevant in 2023 and is it still worth buying? Today we're going to be looking at my personal review with it, the pros and cons of it for photo and video, and who this camera is still meant for. So the A7 III is a full-frame camera. It has dual card slots, which I consider a necessity for professional work, and it's so nice to know that even if you buy this camera now, you will still be able to get dual card slots so that you always have a backup. Battery life is excellent. The A7 III uses the NP-FZ batteries, and I know Sony rates these for probably about 600 photos per battery, but honestly I'm getting close to about 2,000 photos per battery, so it's nice to know that the performance greatly beats out what Sony advertises. I like how I can customize almost every button to whatever I want, and there are specific customization settings for both photo and video. One of my favorite customizations is the ISO. Usually you'd have to click the ISO button, and then click up or down to choose a different ISO, and then click the middle button to select it. But it's honestly very time consuming, and when I'm shooting things like weddings, I need to be able to adjust my settings really fast. Instead, I've customized my ISO to the dial, which I just spin and then it'll raise and lower the ISO. The build quality on the camera is excellent, and I've personally never had any problems with overheating or even getting it damaged when I'm out shooting in the rain or snow. Something that a lot of people don't think about when they buy a camera is what lens choices do you have for that camera. Sony has a huge lineup of lenses, but there are also third-party brands like Tamron and Sigma that also make lenses for the Sony cameras, and those lenses are great as well. Many systems for the A7 III are kind of mixed depending on who you are and how much you care about it. I know a lot of people say that the menu systems in the A7 III are really bad, but I feel like it just depends on how much you use it and how familiar you are with it. Like if I take a Canon camera right now, I'm not going to know where anything in the menu system is, but that doesn't mean that their menu is bad, it just means that I'm not used to it, and if I use it long enough then I'll get to know the menu systems. Now the quality of the viewfinder and the LCD screen will vary depending on who you are. When I first got the A7 III, I thought that the viewfinder and the screen were really good, and that's because I have nothing to compare it with. But now if I take something like the A7S III that I'm shooting on right now, and I try to compare the screen and the viewfinder, I can see that the ones on the A7 III are really bad, but that's only because I'm comparing it to something better. But that doesn't mean that it's totally unusable on the A7 III. It's still definitely totally usable, and I still use it for professional work. I will say that I find the screen of it really bad compared to the viewfinder, but if I'm mostly taking photos then I'm using the viewfinder anyway, so it's not that much of a big deal. But if you're trying to shoot video, then this might be a deal breaker for you. Another upgrade that I missed that some of the newer Sony cameras have right now is the slightly bigger grip. When I'm holding the A7 III, my pinky is still constantly slipping off the bottom, and this might matter to you depending on what you're trying to shoot. If you're just going about your day, just doing some street photography, doing a couple photos here and there, then it might not be that big of a deal. If I'm shooting weddings where the average is probably like 8 hours, then the grip that my pinky is missing starts to get a little bit annoying, and that's why I choose to use a battery grip sometimes. Something that the A7 III doesn't have are separate settings for photo and video. For example, if I'm shooting photos, I like to use flexible spot for my focus area, but if I switch to video and then I change that focus area to something else like zone, and I switch back to photo, my focus area also changes to zone. And this happens with all the other settings like picture profile and focus mode. If you're usually not constantly switching back and forth through photo and video, then this probably doesn't matter to you. But if you're doing a lot of hybrid shooting and you're always switching, then this might be slightly annoying. The newer Sony cameras do have separate photo and video settings, so that's really handy if I'm doing a lot of hybrid shooting and I'm always constantly switching between photo and video. Now onto the photo usage for this camera. So the A7 III has a 24 megapixel CMOS sensor, which is still totally enough for all the type of shooting that I'm doing. I find the image quality for the photos to be excellent. Obviously this also depends on what lens you're pairing with it, but I find that the images that come out of this camera are excellent. The images have amazing dynamic range, which is super useful when I'm shooting things like weddings where I don't always get to control the environment that I'm shooting in, so it's great to know that I have that flexibility. Low light performance with this camera is great as well, and I'm shooting photos even up to like 25,600 ISO, and I'm still getting great results. Autofocus is really fast, and this camera also has eye autofocus, which is super handy when I'm doing wedding and portrait work. When I'm shooting weddings, I need a camera that's really reliable for autofocus, and it's great to know that even now the A7 III still performs great. The only con that I can think of for photo usage is that the A7 III doesn't have the real-time autofocus tracking that the newer Sony cameras have. And that doesn't mean that the A7 III autofocus is bad. It just means that it's not up to date with Sony's newer tech, which is still a little bit better. Now, video usage is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. The A7 III shoots 24 and 30 frames per second in 4K, and 60 and 120 frames per second in 1080. It offers a ton of picture profile choices, but honestly for my usage, I've only ever used HLG2 or S-Log2. I'm personally using HLG2 if I want to just do a little bit of color grading, and I'm using S-Log2 if I want the greatest dynamic range and I want to heavily color grade my footage. It has 5-axis image stabilization, which is great if you're doing some handheld shooting. These specs were amazing in 2018 when the A7 III first came out, because it handled a lot of the base requirements that a lot of people are looking for in a hybrid camera, like 4K shooting, log picture profiles, and image stabilization. But now in 2023, all the newer cameras that come out are so good that the bar for what's necessary in a camera have been raised. The A7 III doesn't shoot 4K 60. I know that 1080 is still completely usable, but it would still be nice to be able to shoot slow motion in 4K. It only shoots 8-bit color, but because 8-bit doesn't have enough data to prevent banding and artifacts, that means you're stuck using S-Log2 and you can't use S-Log3. Pretty much all of the newer cameras nowadays shoot 10-bit color. For video, since you're primarily using the screen when you're recording, having a flip-out screen would be really nice, but the A7 III doesn't have that. I still prefer this tilt screen when I'm shooting photos, but for video, if I want to do some vlogging, or if I wanted to shoot handheld really high above or low to the ground, having a flip screen is really nice to have. I know I mentioned that the A7 III has image stabilization, but it's honestly not that good, and the newer Sony cameras have something called active stabilization, which is so much better than the normal stabilization in the A7 III. The tracking isn't the best in video mode, and the A7 III doesn't even have any sort of eye autofocus in video, only for photos. So it's really hard to shoot people with a very shallow depth of field, especially if they're moving very fast, and still keep the eyes in focus. Depending on what you're shooting, this might not matter, but the A7 III still has the 30-minute record limit. If you're primarily just shooting B-roll, just shooting some clips in the city, then you probably never even come close to this 30-minute record limit. But if you're trying to shoot things like weddings or YouTube videos, where you're gonna have the camera rolling for a long period of time, then with this record limit, you're gonna have to go and restart the recording every 30 minutes. But with all these limitations, how much does the A7 III actually cost right now? And how much would you have to pay to get around these limitations? Currently, the A7 III costs $2,000, and for just $500 more, you can pick up the A7 IV, which pretty much solves all of the cons that I've listed about the A7 III. So it should be a no-brainer to pay a little bit more and pick up the A7 IV instead, which is a much better deal. But the A7 III was such a great seller that everyone bought it back when it was released, and actually beat out Canon and Nikon combined in sales. And that means that there are a lot of people out there who are trying to get rid of their A7 IIIs to upgrade. I can find A7 IIIs for about $1,200, and that's less than half of what the A7 IV costs right now, and that makes it a really good price point to be able to get such a great camera. So who should still get the A7 III? In my opinion, if you're primarily trying to shoot photos, or you're a beginner looking to get or upgrade to their first full frame camera, then the A7 III is the best deal you can get right now for a full frame camera if you're okay with buying a used camera. For about $1,200 used, the A7 III still offers fantastic photo capabilities and pretty decent video functionality, and there isn't a better camera for the price, and it's still definitely worth it. It's so good that I'll still be keeping my A7 IIIs for all my professional work until they die. But if you're not okay with buying used and you do want to buy a new A7 III, then I would say that for $500 more, you should just upgrade to the A7 IV instead. I also think that if you're planning on doing 50% or more video work, then it's still worth it to upgrade to the A7 IV. Having things like 10-bit color, being able to shoot 4K 60, and having a flip-out screen makes it so that for the bar that we're set right now with every single camera, the A7 IV is a much better hybrid camera, where I would say the A7 III is more of a photo dedicated camera now. It's also nice to know that with the A7 IV, you'll be more feature-proof since it has all the specs that all the other camera brands are coming out with right now. And that's my review on the A7 III. I hope this video has helped you out about making a decision about whether you're buying an A7 III. If it has, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting that bell notification button to be notified every time I post a new video. Let me know in the comments if you're buying an A7 III or if you're getting something else. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace!